For those of you who don't know Julie, she is the founder of Goodways, and they help nonprofit organizations raise money, awareness, and support with digital tools and strategy. So Julie actually holds an MBA from UCLA with degrees in psychology and advertising from Syracuse. So psychology from UCLA, right? And advertising from SU?
No, I got an MBA at UCLA and then 2 degrees at Syracuse, one in
Oh, I see.
psychology and one in advertising. I know, I like books.
MBA. How many degrees,
I
Julie?
know,
How
I
many
know, I know.
degrees? MBA from UCLA, psychology and advertising from SU. That sounds like a good combination though, because then it kind of like helps organizations or businesses know how people work with
Oh,
like
we're
what
gonna
they
get into
want.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this is gonna be a really exceptional session with a lot of expert insights from Julie. So I am going to stop sharing and I'll allow you to just take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much. While I set up my slides, can I see in the chat a little appreciation for how hard Jenna works? I got an email from her last night and I was like, "Oh, you're working so late. So let's get that in the chat while I set up here."
Thanks, Julie. You're so sweet for replying.
Hey, you got me when I was online. I'm happy to.
Oh,
All
dedicated.
right. I'm going to do my best to also look at the chat. Yeah, keep it coming for Jenna. Please, please, please. Jenna, if you could keep me on time, that'd be great. Sometimes I get lost. And would I'm gonna look at the chat while I present, but if you could keep an eye on questions, that would be wonderful.
Sure thing.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name's Julie. I have a consultancy for nonprofits called Goodways Inc., and I want to tell you why it's named that. So I have worked at nonprofits since the early 2000s. I started as an AmeriCorps Vista, um, and boy, it's been a long time. But the thing that I noticed on when I was on staff is that everyone would tell us things like we should do. We should do these things. We should do these things. And the advice was, I think, came from a good spot, but a lot of the things we couldn't do. And the thing that I noticed was that every nonprofit had their own way of doing things. And all you really needed to do was find your own good way, right? So there's a lot of things you could do in fundraising. There's a lot of things you can do in digital marketing, but you have to find your own good way. You have to find the thing that works for your organization. And that's why I call the work I do Good Ways, because I think what I do best is help organizations find their own path. Um, Before I worked in nonprofit, I worked in marketing and advertising. I'll another day we'll do a presentation on that. But I drove the Wienermobile across the United States. I worked at an ad agency. I wrote Happy Meals. There's some stuff there. So what I wanted to do today was give you really actionable stuff from marketing and consumer psychology that you could use to engage your board. Because I feel like sometimes we put a lot of energy into board management, and I just want to see you get better returns. So I have like actually some quick and easy things, some of them, and some of them are more long term. So let's get into it. Here are the common issues I hear from all of you about board members. If you don't see something that you're feeling, will you put it in the chat? Or if you see something that resonates with you, give us a thumbs up and let me know. But sometimes we're hearing like lack of engagement. I just don't feel like people are getting the through line of our meetings, right? So, like, we talk about something once, and then 3 months later, we come back and it's like everyone forgot all of the above, Lauren. Okay, let's talk. um, Fundraising reluctance. I think fundraising is one of the most misunderstood job functions in the whole world. And so when we tell board members it's time to fundraise, they can feel scared about that, or they don't know what to do next. They might might suggest that it's time to sell T-shirts, and you know in your heart that's not the fundraiser you want. Um, Limited understanding. Oh, who said this? I don't need you to make the ask. I need the connection. Elena, yes, thank you. Yes. So board members understanding their role. It's a little bit resistance to change, a lack of expertise we hear, fundraising follow through. Serena says boards are all busy and sometimes forget. Let's hold that as we go forward, because I think that shows me some real understanding of who you're trying to reach here. Yes, everyone's really busy. So that's why we're going to look to marketing, what's like marketing people, or their job is to reach busy people. So we're going to steal some stuff from them. Okay, I want to say up front too, some of you with your boards might be dealing with some power issues or some power dynamics. And that is a real issue. And I hope that we can give you some things that help you move through that. But that is a long-term thing as well. But I wanted to acknowledge that some of you might be feeling that. And we can do some resources at the end maybe about that. Okay, so like I just said, we are going to bust through these board member hurdles with marketing tactics. So, one thing I want you to think about is, where do you want your board operating from? When we talk about marketing, a lot of times what we're talking about is connecting with people's emotions. So, when you think about your board, what emotion do you want them operating from? Right? Does that make sense? Can you tell me in the chat where you might like, what do you want your board to feel? Empowered, enthusiastic, wonderful words, useful, important, great, motivated, vital. Oh, these are great, great words. I suggest you write these down and use them as a true north. We do this in marketing a lot. We think about what might someone be feeling now and where do we want to move them to? That's a really important discussion in marketing. Keen to do something that lasts more than a month. David, I appreciate you. So, a lot of times when I look at boards, I see them operating from a place of fear and frustration. Does that resonate with anyone? So, they are scared to do things. And where I see fear most of all, and tell me if any of you have seen this, is fear sometimes doesn't look like someone that's scared. Fear looks like, I need more changes to this document. If someone could give me a list of talking points, then maybe I could do this. That's despite you have given the talking points many times. Can I get someone to make a 20-page PowerPoint that I can send to people? I'm sure that will do it. Those are fear tactics. That's delaying, right? That's delaying action. Frustration might look like frustration with the length of board meetings, frustration with, I wish this was better, and it can come out in this almost near angry way. But frustration comes from the place with most board members of being overwhelmed, I find. And what we want is we want our boards to operate from a place of confidence, trust, and belief, right? We want them to believe so hard that they can do it scared. So, one thing to keep in mind is this is the IDA model: attention, interest, decision, and action. It's an old marketing model. And what we like to think about when we talk about people joining the board isn't the finish line, it's a starting line. So in marketing, we're always looping through these four things: attention, interest, decision, and action, right? We can't do action before we've done the other three things. So when someone's on the board, sometimes we think, all right, they're in that action mode. But every interaction, we kind of got to make sure we get their attention, their interest, they decide to act, and they act. Okay. So onboarding is a really important process here, but also every board meeting is a marketing opportunity, right? Every board meeting is like, you are paying attention. Do I have your interest? Decide what you're going to do and go for it. So my first marketing tip for you is to know your customer, right? So I've seen some stuff in here. Serena says, I always ask to share their stories of why they came to the board and what is their story. Yes, that's great. This is market research, right? So knowing your customer, sometimes so bad marketing asks general questions. Our customers are female, they are 35, right? That is not nuanced enough for us these days. We want to understand goals and motivations. We want to understand their fear and objections, and we want to know what they believe. Now, the thing with market research is if we ask somebody, and if you can imagine asking a board member, what is your motivation? Do you think you would get a really good answer? Probably not. And the reason why is it's a hard question to answer. If we said, why are you, some of the board says our CEO asked them to join. Yes, they were voluntold. Sometimes I get a lot. Someone told me I had to do this. It's a place to start from, and at least they're being honest, I always say. Um, so if we want to understand their fears and objections too, we don't ask that straight out. We want to infer it from their answers. So I'm going to show you some good marketing research questions to ask your board. So we just need to ask better questions. So sometimes I see this question, how do you want to be involved on the board? And I don't think that's a good question because it's assuming that the person understands the variety of ways they could be helpful and understands like where they are most useful. We're going to not make them do that work. Instead, I might ask them questions like this. What are the kinds of problems what kind of problems do people look to you to solve at work or maybe, in your life? What do people call you for? And the reason we're asking it this way is because people are much better at reporting on something that did happen in the past than predicting what they'll do in the future. All right, I'll say that again. People are much better at predicting what happened to them in the past. Much better at reporting what happened to them in the past versus predicting what'll happen to them in the future. So we want to say, give me some examples of things people call you for, or things people ask you to solve, or what the people around you think you're an expert in. I always ask, what was the last project you worked on? Sometimes I get answers about working on their house. Sometimes I get answers on a project that they are working on at work. But it's really telling what they will share. Tell me more and then insert anything is a great question all the time. What are these making you think of? What good questions do you have for your board members? Can any of you share in the chat of things that you've asked board members that have been particularly fruitful? I'll say when you ask these questions, what you're really doing is you want to listen to in between what's in the answers, right? So if someone's saying, "Oh, people always come to me when they need an introduction to somebody," okay, that's very good information to have. The when people are sharing the last project they work on, I'm always trying to understand like what would that translate to at our organization? Do we have a project that they would like? Elena shares, what was a recent volunteer activity you loved doing? That's wonderful. That's a great question. But these are going to give you examples of places they were involved and where they could be involved. What's your connection to our park? What's your connection to our organization? Yeah. I like to ask that question sometimes. How did you first discover us? Like, how did we first meet? There's a thing in marketing that happens where we look at marketing questions, like customer survey questions, and we call it the mom test. And it's called the mom test because it's the questions can kind of sound like how I would talk to my mom, which I'd be like, Mom, I have this great idea. And then because my mom's nice. What do you think my mom says? She says, "Oh, honey, that sounds wonderful." She has no idea what I'm talking about. So we want to try to make sure we're not asking questions that are like, "Do you think this is a good idea?" And then people want to please us. So they say, "Yeah, that sounds great." All right, I'll give you a couple more questions. So this is the fundraising one. I see this all the time. We're asking board members, like, how do you think we can increase fundraising? How do you think we can increase community support? And they get, it's not their job. They don't work in fundraising for the most part. So they don't know all the tools that are available to us. They don't know the tactics that pay off. They will often say, well, we should call some companies. Let's call the companies. And we can get down a rabbit hole with board members here, right? So instead of that, I like to ask, tell me groups or communities you belong to. What do you do when you're not at a board meeting, right? Tell me about the rest of your life. A very, very good question is, how would you describe this organization to your friends and family? Because even if it is not the exact same words I would use, it's really interesting to hear what they emphasize. And one of the best ways we can influence customers in marketing is by using their own words back to them. So if everyone describes us in one way, we might want to think about using that language when we talk to them. Jenny says, teaching our board fundraising is not just making the ask. Yes, Jenny, a constant battle, right? It's not making the ask. It's the connections. It's the inviting their friends. It's telling their friends about the organization. I will give you, I didn't make a slide for this, but this is a trick that I use, tactic, whatever. You can use it, steal it from me. I like to tell boards they are chief invitation officers. Your job is to always be inviting. If you see an opportunity for someone to experience the magic that inspired you, that's your job. Invite, invite, invite. I also like to ask, what part of this organization are you most enthusiastic about? I want to know what sparks their passion. Sometimes I see this question asked as, which program do you like the best? Or which program of ours moves you the most? I think you can divorce the question from program and say, what part? Because it could be something that's in all of your programs. It could be in aspects of your mission, or it could definitely be a project or program. So we're just broadening up to get a little more information. So that is my first tip. David, I am really glad to see that you are going to use all these questions. Okay, marketing tip number 2, one of my favorites, small commitments. In psychology, this is called foot in the door approach. All right. There is a very famous study I think it took place during a political campaign, but they asked people if they were going to vote a certain way. And they were like, I'm undecided. I don't know. And they said, and they were like getting a lot of people like, I don't have time to talk. This shut doors and faces. And then they changed the ask to not be about who are you voting for, but saying, would you share with us what you care about? Great. More people can do that. That's an easier ask. And then for people that shared that, they came back and said, you shared you cared about this. Would you be willing to put a sign on your front lawn that tells people you care about that? And they were like, yeah, easy enough. So now they had a sign on their front lawn. And then the next ask was like, we see that you have a sign that says you care about this. Would you be willing to put a sign in favor of this candidate? And then it was easier to get a yes then. But it was a series of small steps. And because they had said yes to the first one, they were more committed down the line. Did I describe that in a way that makes sense? Anyone can let me know in the chat. Amber says yes, so we're moving on. Okay. So asking someone to agree to a smaller request before asking for a large one is great. Once I was on a board, and at the very first board meeting, they just happened to be talking about putting the organization in your will. And they were like, Julie, are you going to put the organization in your will? And I was like, wow, I don't even have a will. And this is my first meeting. It was not a great ask for me. But I understood that that was what the meeting was about. There was no hard feelings, but that was a little bit too big too soon. The other thing about small commitments, and in that story, is that public commitments are a little more, you feel a little more tied to something you've said in public. And all we want to do here is just like leverage smaller commitments into larger ones. So I'm going to give you some actual tips, some actual things I have done with boards. Okay, easy asks for boards. Add your board service to your LinkedIn if they're using LinkedIn. But here's the other one that's really special. Add it to your bio on your company website. If you have corporate board members and they have bios on a website, anyone that wants to sell anything to them is like looking at those bios all the time and trying to connect with them on something. So if they see it, it becomes a point of conversation for a lot of people in their lives. The other thing with those bios is they're often used if your board members go speak anywhere. So now it's going to get announced, it's going to be like, now our next speaker is this person and they're a board member of this, because it's just going to already be in their bio. It's getting you into rooms that you wouldn't normally be mentioned in. So I always love that tip. With new board members, I always ask them to announce their board appointment, on any social media profile that makes sense to them, in an email to their colleagues. And of course, we will offer to write that and draft that for them. And I even do it when people are elected to new terms, right? Like, oh, what a great time to announce that you have been elected to a second term. All we're doing is positioning it a little bit more as a win instead of an administrative activity. Here's my all-time favorite one from the last 6 months. I know you all have social media profiles, and I know we've all been struggling with like, why are we doing so much of this? Where's the return? My opinion, maybe not yours. One thing that we can ask the board to do, because I see from a lot of board members, they will offer, I think we should be posting on social more. I think we should be doing more on social media. And sometimes the capacity of the organization is not there. I always counter that with, well, actually, one way that we could expand our reach on social media is if our posts get more comments. So one thing you could do as board members is just make sure you're the first, second, third, and fourth comments on our posts. It will help us reach more people. And if you think I'm just giving you a task that's cute, I want to show you a little bit of data. So hopefully I do this and we switch to a different screen. Can you all see my new screen? Yes, great. This is from an actual organization. They're a little bit tiny. But we asked their board to start commenting on their posts. And this was after 2 weeks of that. And that's about 7 posts, right? This is not a lot there was no ad budget here, but you can see their impressions on their posts went up 18%. The reach of their posts increased 24%. The likes went up and the comments, of course, went up because we were asking people to do it. The other thing that we saw this do for this board was because they had to comment on it, it meant they had to stop, read, and interact with the posts. These became the talking points that they were asking about. They were like, oh, I shared that story. They were just more in it just because we had asked them to stop for a second. That's a small commitment a board member could easily make. Another thing I like to do with board members is that's a small commitment, but a public commitment. Lend your name to a campaign. So that might look like, hey, we're going to do an ask for back to school season. Can we make one email that looks like it comes from you? We'll use your name. And in the email, we're going to talk about, we're going to have you make the ask. We write it. They don't. They will approve it. But would it be okay to use your name? Very easy to say yes to, and very much a leadership position for that board member. And the last thing that I would include here, and I'm really interested to hear if this has sparked any ideas or brainstorming for you, so please share, because I think everyone could benefit to hear how your brain's working. I like to have everybody give a why I give testimonial, which is just a couple of sentences to say, would you be willing to share why you give? What's the reason for it? And we keep those and we might put them on our website and we might use them in social media and we might put them inside of a campaign. Um, but these can be used over and over again. But the fact that someone has written down the reason that they give is internalizing, right? They're owning it a little more. Their belief has gone up. So, does it make you all think of anything? Any ideas? Anything that you think you could implement? Are you all going to go ask your board members to be like the 1 through 5 commenters on your post now? Great, do it. Okay. So all of these tips are getting to the bigger tip, which is just really that confidence, trust, and belief for your board members starts with clarity, follow-up, and personalization. Okay, those are the things you want to make sure you've got. So clarity, I think, is a big one for the board because we are sometimes throwing so much information at them that it can be hard to sift through it, right? So we are giving them board minutes, agendas, attachments, all of that. And sometimes it can be hard to find that clarity. And sometimes what I see from board members is that when there's so much stuff presented to them, they will drill down on where they feel the most comfortable. And unless we guide them to the place that's most useful, right? So sometimes the place that's most comfortable will be like, I reviewed this document and I found 9 spelling errors. And that's, fine and and it can be very helpful. But sometimes when it's like internal documents are not the best place, but person might be an editor. So, we want to help them find their most useful spot. The follow-up is really important too, because after board meetings, we want to follow up in a very clear way, and sometimes what it is just, 5 pages of meeting minutes, but highlighting clear action items can be very helpful there too. And then personalization is really using all of the things that we've talked about in these first 2 tips about really understanding them, really understanding where they come from, to dictate the future asks for them. Does that make sense? So if we know what their goals and motivations are, we know what their small steps could be, we're personalizing it based on all the information we've gotten before. So I'll give you an example. I have 2 board members. They are on the same board. One of them believes that their board leadership is really the expression of leadership. This is my leadership activity. This is for this board member, this is part of their plan to be promoted at work. This is showing leadership in the community. This is a community that they care about. And they are being a leader. So for them, everything kind of goes back to this leadership theme. For another board member, it's a very personal connection to the mission. I want to prevent this from happening. Like this happened to my sister. I don't want anyone else to feel like she did. This is very personal to her. So we're just kind of, we're not creating new documents for everybody, but we're always just emphasizing different things when we talk to them and when we think about where they can take action next. Okay, I have one more tip for you, but this is a big one and it goes in many parts. So here we go. Marketing tip number 3, make it memorable. Headlines are the whole story. Headlines are everything. They need to tell you the action you take after. It can't just be a description, right? We're going to talk about where to use headlines in a second. Repetition is your friend. We want to make sure you activate emotion. And then I'm going to take my own advice and repeat. What gets repeated gets remembered. However you need to think of that, go for it. So when I talk about headlines, here are 5 ways we design headlines, like just as a quick exercise to get you writing. in marketing, right? So we might like kind of look at, okay, a list, 5 ways to, like, what's the headline, 5 ways to be successful at the next board meeting. Like that is a great way to send your, to send the pre-reading, you read this, you read this, you read this, ask these questions. Um, Sometimes headlines declare a result. Sometimes headlines have a how-to element to it, and then sometimes headlines are going to highlight a benefit of doing the thing. And then sometimes headlines pique curiosity. These are only prompts, they're not prescriptive templates. And so, what I sometimes like to do when I look at things is say, what's my headline here? And I kind of cycle through these 5 things and think which one works best. Like, what's the version of it that would work best? So, these are just brainstorms. And so now I want to show you where you could use headlines. And I'm going to then show you an example. So, power headlines, right? Headlines where we want people to understand and where we cannot count on them maybe reading the whole thing. We want to make the point of it very prominent. I would use a headline on an agenda, on slide titles, in email subject lines, and in meeting minutes. If I want my board to take action, I want to be very, very clear on what that action is. And so let me show you an example. This is a real life example, and I have changed and blurred things to protect the innocent. Like most of you, we have board decks, and they say things like financials, right? This is an organization, and they put their financials up, and they included, this is year to date, and it includes program expenses. The conversation around these financials was, our revenue is down this year, and we are going to have to cut things unless we can raise more money. This is how it appeared in the first board meeting. It was also done in the meeting minutes, and it came out as, our board needs to take action or else we're going to have to cut things. Here's how it looked in the second board meeting about this issue. This is 3 months later. Cash flow. Template here. And then it had this line. Board fundraising is essential to our success. Do you see where we might be going in the slow motion train wreck? We still had not raised the funds, and we still were looking at this. Now, one thing that's really important too is that somebody had put in this spreadsheet a number that was like, if we raise this much, this is what our numbers will look like. So in the date, it said we hope $75,000 comes in 3 months. And then it made it look positive down at the bottom. What do you think happened? Do you think this spurred the board to fundraise? You might be able to tell by how I'm asking the question. Yes, it did not. So what people were reading was this is just a regular cash flow statement. Everything looks fine. What should have happened was this. We needed a headline. There's a critical need for program support. And then on the side, we needed action items. There's 6 weeks left of cash. Expenses have been cut. Action items. Can you make next year's gift early? Can we find corporate matches of your board gifts? Can you circle back with your prospects in the next 2 weeks? We've given you a list. And should we look at different sponsorship opportunities? This is what should have happened earlier. It didn't. But this shows you the power of a headline to make people sit up and take notice, because the board all knew the information, but it wasn't presented in a way that pushed them to act. There were other issues as well, as you might imagine, but this was a really good example of that. When I do agendas, I always like to title them, this is an old reference now. The show Friends used to always make their show titles the one with the, and I like to do that on agendas. This is the one with the budget. This is the one where we talk about programs for next year. This is the one with this, just so people know what we're doing ahead of time. All right, personalization. This is a key one for board members, but I also want to give you some ways that make it not so intensive, because I think sometimes with boards, we can get into the place where we're trying to treat 12 people 12 different ways. So for a lot of you, I see distribution lists or like big chunks of like cut and paste emails. And the email always says, "Hi, board, here's this." If any of you have ever taken a CPR class, there's a one moment in a CPR class where they talk about what do you do if you have to administer CPR in public. And they always say your first step is to attend to the victim and then point to someone in the crowd and say, "You call 911." And the reason you do it that way is because if you said, "And someone call 911" in a big group, people would assume somebody else already has it handled. But if you point to a person and you say, "You do this," they know it's their job. So I think about that when we're group emailing the board, when we want to do something. Like use it when you can, and like for like distribution of stuff. But every now and then try to get like a one-on-one email, even if you're sending the same kind of email to everybody. But just to say like, "Hi, Jenna, I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the next board meeting. Here's the minutes, here's this, here's that. And we're going to ask you to talk about that thing that you had to follow up on." I have one client who puts notes on the seats of board members, not every single one and not every single time at board meetings. And it's just a handwritten note that says, "I'm really glad you're here. We really enjoyed that meeting the person you introduced to us. Your participation is so valuable." It's a nice personalization and it makes people feel really glad about being there. And the last thing I'll say is try to tie experiences to their identity, right? I've given you the example before about leader, but the most powerful identity that people have is sometimes where they are in their family. So my last example for you today is I was working with an organization and we had a volunteer event. There was a community volunteer event. And they were like, "I really wish the board would come out more to this volunteer event because it's really special and it's really nice. But we just can't seem to get them to come to stuff." You throw an emoji in the chat if that one sounds familiar. So the thing that we did is we looked around and we were like, "Well, what is there something in common? Like, does your board share something in common? Like, is there anything we can do?" We took a look at the volunteer event, and the volunteer event was attracting like their older volunteers, just because of like time and place and day and activity. And we're like, there might be an opportunity here. So this is my last marketing tip. So this is how we change something that's generic to something that's tied to identity. So the previous volunteer day advertising, or like this was like the invite, looked a lot like this. This is an example. And it was like, "Volunteer day, come on out. See you there." And then when we were trying to think of identity and trying to think about how to get more board members there and how to like really make it resonate with the community more, we just focused on identity. And all we did was change it to it's grandparents volunteer day. And then we did other ones throughout the year with different like parents, parents and kids and all that stuff. We did not change anything about the event. We just changed the title. We had double the participation and almost every board member showed up. And they showed up with their grandkids and many of them brought friends. We were so excited to see this, but we had just kind of changed it to say, "We want to see you there," is what that did. So that's a tactic you can use. I think sometimes we think, "Oh, we're being too specific," but in being too specific, sometimes we're being more effective. So let's remember what we've talked about together. All right. If we want more board engagement, we're going to approach it like a marketer. We're going to get to know our customer. We're going to get our foot in the door and build a series of small commitments. And don't bury the lead on those slides and those agendas. Like, let's use headline writing to make sure that we are getting people to where we need them to be. When I do headline stuff, I usually get all the data we need first, and then I go back through and do a headline pass. So I'm not trying to do it at the same time. And finally, make it personal. I mean, every organization is filled with people and each person is different. So as much as we can do to make it seem like it's for them, the better. But I would love to take questions now or hear anything. I don't have too much for you in terms of like web stuff, but you can follow me on LinkedIn. I put some of that stuff. I put a lot of the tips I share there, and that's my email too. And you're welcome to reach out. All right.
I just sent Julie's LinkedIn and also her website in the chat. So, yeah, we have about 5, 10 minutes if you want to go through
Yeah, absolutely.
questions.
Yeah, I'll take Natalie's question I see here. Any recommendations for engaging board members who are appointed to serve on the board through their employer? As opposed to joining the board because they believe in the mission. Okay, so yeah, this happens a bit sometimes where there's a corporate board member who then will give, suggest someone else that works with them to take the seat. Natalie, is that about the situation? Like we have someone from X company and then their like coworker is in the seat now? I'm going to say yes. So with that, I actually think it just is kind of yes, says Natalie. Okay, Natalie, if you want to put more details in the chat while I answer, I'll take those too. So I think board members who are appointed to serve through their employer are it's actually a little bit easier for me because I think I can see the motivation so much more linear, right? So it's like, oh, this is kind of part of your job. So one thing I might want to do with those people is to say, like, find out more like, hey, like, do a lot of other people, volunteer on boards through your company? What's your reporting back supposed to look like? Are you here to help with transparency on a grant that we've received? And if so, what information can I give you to make that easy for you? Or is this something where I can help you get visibility at work and we can talk about your accomplishments on the board so it helps you? I just kind of want to get a sense of, what do they get out of it? And when we have that conversation, it might be the first time they've thought about it, to be honest, and that's okay. You can work it out together. But Natalie, if there's more details, go for it and I'll put it in the chat and I'll get to those. So let me scroll up through the chat. Thank you, Denise. Good luck to you. Okay, Jenny says, how do you explain to your board about projections for the rest of the year? Our campaign ends in December. How can we ensure we'll make our goals? Jenny, I'd like to know if it sounds like you're doing some reassuring of your board. Is it that you want them to not freak out about how much money comes in December in nonprofits? Like that's the revenue month, or is it that you want their help on the December campaign? That would be helpful for me to know. Okay, and then while Jenny answers, I'll look at Natalie's details. Board seats dedicated to specific orgs. Oh, these are assignments from other organizations, right? So they're not necessarily like corporate seats. I see. Yeah, it's okay for somebody. It's okay for you to not have 100% perfect engagement on your board. We look at the board as a portfolio. So sometimes we have it's usually like a third are very active, a third are like you're like they're there and then they're not, and they're third you're like I don't know where they are. Sometimes that happens. It's not ideal, but that happens. And I think that if they are in that position where they are filling a seat, you might just want to have a conversation with them and say, like, yeah, I know you're here as because you are feeling a dedicated seat. Like, what are your ideas? Like, what could we best? Are you interested in learning new things? We can put you outside of your marketing and communications area so you could learn something new. Or are you interested in using your area of expertise? Or are you interested in meeting people and just trying to find out how they might want to use it? Because chances are they might feel like it's a little bit of an obligation as well. I hope that helps. Yeah, good. Yes, thinking of the as a portfolio is very helpful. One of the things that I think with board members we can sometimes do is kind of get we can kind of get too focused on like the one person who's not participating. And sometimes what we need to do is just take our energy off it for a second and focus on what's working. Sometimes that can just, I think for mental health, I think that's great too.
Hmm. Yeah,
All right.
I love your techniques to just like really be able to relate to the board better, like with specifics. I think that was one key that I took away was just being really very specific as well with like the asks and things.
Yeah, absolutely. And they all don't need to be asked the same thing, because they're not going to all want to engage in the same way. I have a spreadsheet that I will use. It's very simple. And it's just like every month across the top and every board member down the side, and just kind of plan out their year of like what might we ask them for, where might they want to be involved, and just
Oh,
do it
interesting.
all at once, one time, and see if it works.
I wonder, would people like, would that be something that you would share with the
Oh
our
yeah, yeah. I'll
participants?
include it when I send you the PDF of the slides.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
Yeah, it's you'll be I will say to the 114 people here, you'll be underwhelmed. It's kind of a dumb looking spreadsheet, but you can have it.
You can have it. See, so generous, so gracious.
I'll give you my dumbest spreadsheet.
No, I mean, we love all the tools
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. Have I don't know if I'm doing a great job looking at the questions. So have I missed any?
I think just Elena's last question here, Alana, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Doing that in conjunction with the board chair.
Yeah, let me see. Do you have to do that? Do the engagement plan with your board chair?
Yeah, I'm not sure what she was referring to there.
Yeah. So here, let me say generally about the board chair. Board chairs in general. Yeah. Okay. So she says yes. Board chairs in general, again, people might want to be involved in different ways. I have some board chairs that really want to get like their sleeves rolled up and get into the day to day. I have another board chair that I'll be honest with you, does not even bring a pen to the meetings. So to each their own. But it depends how much work the board chair is doing. Ideally, I love the board chair to manage the board, to say, hey, these are your people, these are your relationships. Let's sit down together and brainstorm some ideas for these people, and then we'll check in on it. That would be my ideal.
Hmm. Hmm.
I would share that spreadsheet with just myself.
Good to know. Good
That's
to
a
know.
that's a me in the board chair maybe, but I don't necessarily want to share it with everyone about like, oh yes, in 8 months I'll be asking you for something. That might dilute my ask.
Yeah, yeah. That's understandable. Well, this has been great. Yes, thank you, Colby. And thank you for everyone who's affirmed us all of this time. Guess I'll put my camera on here.
Come on back, Jenna.
Coming back. I've been listening to everything that everyone's been saying, all the speakers, and I'm just so in awe of like all of the expertise you all have. It's just wonderful to hear and to share with us for free. So I can't believe it. It's amazing. So everybody in the webinar, all the registrants, definitely take advantage of this opportunity to, speak with Julie. Any last questions or
Any
if you
last questions? I'll let you know. I'm going to a board meeting this afternoon, so now I have to be like, well, I really know what I'm talking about, everybody. So no one talks at
right,
those meetings but me.
they're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to repost Julie's contact in case you want to reach out. And this has been just wonderful. So thank
Oh,
you
I'm
again.
so glad. I love this whole sector so much. I think what you do is some of the most important work out there. And the fact that you showed up today for this just speaks to how wonderful you are and that you're always seeking new solutions and improvements for the just all these wonderful causes. So it always inspires me. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for those words.
Yeah.
Enjoy the
Bye.
rest of your day.
Thank you.